So we're back, continuing Zendikar. We got through kind of broad overview of the history, and we started on some of the different races, which really only the core really stood out. It was that interesting. The audio last time somehow seemed to... I was testing out something new, but I think I chose the wrong setting, and so it wasn't actually on. So yeah, there was no audio last session, but I don't really want to redo it. So we'll start with the merfolk. Curious, thoughtful, analytical, the merfolk of Zendikar are natural scholars and explorers. In the past, merfolk society was organized around their belief in three deities. But in the wake of the Eldrazi, merfolk had religion that their religion was a web of lies built on a corrupted memory of the Eldrazi titans and handed down from generation to generation. Now, society faces an identity crisis. In peaceful times, the merfolk would have thought about the meaning of this revelation, but with the danger of the Eldrazi broods, the survivors have largely set aside all their old creeds and joined together, united. Old grudges still linger, but the well-being of the race and world far outweigh the ancient conflicts between the creeds. Merfolk are associated with blue mana, though the two traditional merfolk creeds express this connection in different ways. Merfolk are an amphibious race born at home in the water but comfortable on dry land. Humanoid in form, they have skin toned to vibrate silver, russet blue, or deep purple. Long skinny fins extend from the backs of their forearms and calves. And their fingers and toes are webbed. Hair-like growths on their heads are either thick and bristly, like the needles of a sea urchin, or long and wavy, resembling fine seaweed. In either case, the hair typically ranges from red to warm, brown to black. Male merfolk have fins extending down their cheekbones. Merfolk wear little clothing unless armored for battle. They drape themselves with nets and a minimum of cloth and use large bleached seashells for armor, held together and augmented with leather. Merfolk beliefs divided the world into three realms of sky, sea, and land, each presided over by one deity. Before the rise of the Eldrazi, each individual merfolk would choose to follow the creed of one god or another, shaping their life around the teachings and ideals of that deity. With the emergence of the three Eldrazi titans, however, the horrible truth that Amelia, Ula, and Kulsi were nothing more than distorted memories of Emrakul, Ulamog, and Kozilek has shattered these beliefs. The goddess Emeria was thought to rule the wind realm, including the sky, wind, and clouds. She was seen as a goddess of magic and mysticism and was represented as an angel with dark hair and silver eyes. Those merfolk who followed her creed sought wisdom and truth in the wind realm, exploring mystical forces rather than natural causes behind historical events. They were evasive and intentionally pragmatic in their interactions with others. and were described as manipulative and deceptive. Part of the philosophy associated with Blue Man is that a person's thing essence is as malleable as its appearance, so that from that perspective this behavior was not deceptive, but reflected the shifting and subjective nature of reality. Wizards of the Emeria Creed focused their use of Blue Man on spells of control, particularly magic of calling the land, its creatures, other people, or even magic itself. Practitioners of this magic, called Lowell mages, were highly sought after by explorers but rarely trusted because of their tendency towards manipulative scheming. The god Ula was said to rule the water realm, including the seas, rivers, and lakes. He was a god of practical knowledge and exploration, and depicted as a merfolk with the tail of a fish in place of legs. Ula Creed merfolk emphasized the intellectual aspects of blue-aligned philosophy, pushing hard evidence and reason over passion. They were analytical scholars, chroniclers, explorers, and navigators, priding themselves on being blunt and straightforward. Stone Raiders sought out and studied Eldrazi ruins in an effort to reconstruct a historical record. The trickster god Kosi ruled everything else, the dangerous and hospitable land where chaos and misfortune reigned. No merfolk would openly admit to following his creed, but the most ambitious and manipulative among them viewed Kosi as an ally who could grant them control over chaotic forces of the world. Since the Eldrazi's rise, some of these merfolk have come forward and turned their skills as spies and infiltrators to the cause of their people. The Eldrazi have overrun the most prominent centers of Norfolk habitation and learning, including the city of Seagate. The lighthouse at Seagates are both library and home for merfolk scholars and explorers, and its destruction represents a terrible loss of both people and knowledge. As a result, merfolk across Zendikar have left their traditional homes and found shelter wherever possible. The low mage Noyan Dar, formerly an iconoclastic scholar at the Seagate Lighthouse, has taken on the mantle of leadership for the merfolk refugees of Tazeen. He brought them inland to found the Coralhelm Refuge, which has become capital and shelter for merfolk from across the plain. Even before the rise of the Eldrazi, Noyandar's studies led him to the conclusion that the merfolk deities were not actually gods but destroyers. But his research was dismissed. He rejected his intuitive leaps. He now guides explorers and scholars among the merfolk, forming alliances with their counterparts among other races, coordinating their efforts to understand the ancient ruins, the power of the Hedrons, and the anatomy of the Eldrazi, in search of an upper hand against the monstrous invaders. Coralhelm is also a central repository for the results of these studies. Brave merfolk who distract Eldrazi and bring back information to Coralhelm have a short life expectancy. The task necessarily involves getting closer to the Eldrazi that can be reasonably called safe. These merfolk are united in the belief that they will find answers through observation and study. Merfolk volunteer for this task are both intelligent and resilient. They increasingly are joined by members of other races. Elite merfolk soldiers called Sea Stalkers are allocated from Coralhelm to protect expeditions are believed to have a good chance of yielding information. Occasionally, one or more Sea Stalkers are assigned to accompany an expedition, even against its leader's will, to ensure that any knowledge gained on the expedition is put to proper use. Born in ancient servitude and bred to a life of decadent corruption, the vampires of Zendikar feed on the energies in the blood of living creatures. Energies are particularly strong in times of terror and pain. To other members, of other races, they are a fearsome mystery, the stuff of nightmares, hunting their prey like beasts through the jungle, or reclining on thrones made of skulls in moss-draped cities. The vampires are locked in a brutal civil war. One side desperately battling to remain free are those who hold the traditional ways. On the other side are those whose legacy reaches back into the deepest recesses of history, bound once more to their ancient masters and creators. These vampires hunt their kin into the wild swamps in an effort to extinguish the very idea of freedom and rebellion. Vampires are associated with black mana since their existence is predicated on draining the life from others who fuel their own existence, on putting their own lives ahead of everyone else's. Philosophically, they do not constrain themselves with artificial rules of morality, but believe that the strong can and should take what they need from the weak. Vampires are not precisely undead. Their unique nature comes from an eldritch disease that turns their flesh cold, makes their skin gray, feel dead to the touch, enables them to drain and concentrate magical energy from the blood of other living creatures. They are tall and slender, with long, elegant necks and broad shoulders. Bony horns protrude from their shoulders and elbows, augmented by the layered plates of their armor and clothing. Their canine teeth are slightly elongated, but not enough to protrude between their closed lips. Vampires dress in leather and chitin, augmented with fine silk and gauzy fabric. They decorate their skin in elaborate symmetrical patterns of red paint from blood and mineral pigments. Their clothing is an odd mixture of complex layers and elaborate patterns, combined with plenty of exposed skin, since their cold bodies are unaffected by outside temperatures. They were created many centuries ago by a magical infection that originated from the Eldrazi and enslaved them to Ulamog's will. Their unique diet was a means for the Eldrazi to drain the life and magical essence from the other races, concentrating that energy in the vampire's blood for Ulamog to harvest at a later time. After the Eldrazi were sealed back into their prison, the vampires slowly built a dark civilization centered on the continent of Goldraz. The memory of their ancient masters faded into legend and became a distant notion that they are survivors of oppression and slavery. At its height, their civilization was perhaps the most refined and cultured among all the races of Zendikar. Vampire cities were places of decadent splendor, ornamented with grotesque art, macabre ornamentation, and the stately courts of the ruling blood chiefs. Vampires live comfortable lives of luxury, attended by legions of faceless undead thralls called gnolls. The blood chiefs are the central figures of vampire society. The Eldrazi directly infected them, and they in turn created the masses of other vampires, each establishing a family that owes allegiance to its chief. The tastes and passions of an individual blood chief tend to be imprinted on the vampires they create, so each family shares certain tendencies of behavior and personality. Unfortunately, most blood chiefs tend toward violent insanity, though a handful are more benevolent than the rest. The blood chiefs originally numbered in their hundreds, but centuries of rivalry have narrowed their number down to barely a dozen. With the emergence of the Titans, all of vampire society has been thrown into chaos. The Titan Ulamog attention seemed to be centered on vampires at first. A beacon of psychic and destructive energy summoned the vampires into the Titan's awful presence at the heart of Balaged. Tens and thousands of vampires, including most of the blood chiefs, found themselves magically bound to answer that call as Ulamog began the long overdue harvest. Driven by their distant memories and oppressive servitude, however, many vampires resisted the will of their alien creator. This led to a brutal and costly civil war. The families that fell under the Eldrazi's thrall joining forces with the teeming mass of the Lamong's brood to annihilate most of those who resisted. The calling, as most vampires came to call it, left only 2 blood chiefs alive. In the midst of the slaughter, much of the continent was leveled. Swamps, forests, hills, cities across Bala Ged were reduced to fine, powdery white sand. Kalitas and the House of Ged are now entirely in the service of the Eldrazi. These vampires have completely abandoned all aspects of their once refined civilization. Their former elegance gone, they are now savage and wild. They wear featureless bony plates over their eyes that suggest the faceless skull of Vulamog, and the elegant patterns of their body paint have been replaced by random spatters from the brutality of the hunt. Though he is no less savage than the vampires he leads, Kalitas seems to retain his considerable intellect. He is hiring new vampires at a frantic pace never seen before in an attempt to make up for the losses in the calling. Vampires in his service are dedicated to hunting down and exterminating the few vampires that continue to resist the Eldrazi. Drana and the House of Calistria are the focal point of the resistance. Drana has gathered 3 vampires from every family to fight against the Eldrazi, though their main priority is staying alive. With most of the major settlements destroyed and swallowed back into the swamps of Gortaraz, the vampires live in settlements dragged on giant sledges by vampire gnolls. Small and mobile, these sledge camps are dangerous and predatory, often attacking the settlements of other races for food and new gnoll servants. A typical sledge camp consists of 30 or so vampires and as many gnolls to serve them. Drana herself is focused on acquiring the knowledge she needs to defeat the Eldrazi by dredging it from her own memory. Lamong's corruption created her in a long-forgotten time, and her inability to remember that time is maddening to her. She is exploring magical means to augment her own memory with some success. Her unearthed memories have revealed secrets that have aided the vampire's efforts to fight the spawn. She is expanding her experiments to plumb the ancestral memories that linger in the blood of vampires sired by the blood chiefs, has successfully dredged up memories of ancient ruin sites that might hold artifacts and weapons that would be useful against the Eldrazi. Working with the other races is difficult for the vampires. There's no escaping the fact that no matter how closely their goals align, one member of the team sees another as a potential meal. A vampire's blood hunger can be controlled but never truly suppressed. Still, some vampires have tried to integrate into the settlements and warbands of other races with mixed results. Some settlements of Khorne humans see the benefit in having a vampire working with them, and are willing to give up some of their own blood in exchange for the assistance of a creature with superhuman strength, agility, and intelligence. When these arrangements fail, though, the outcome is predictably tragic for all involved. Goblins are an inquisitive and adaptable race, hampered by their small size and natural cowardice, and a severe shortage of common sense. They eagerly explore areas that others hesitate to enter and obsessively fiddle with artifacts that more sensible folk would take careful precautions with. They prize ancient artifacts, but not for their value, primarily as a mark of status, for a precious trophy proves that its owner survived a deep and dangerous ruin. Goblins are associated with red mana. The shamans are fond of spells that create or control fire and lightning to smite their foes. They're quick to follow their impulses and passions into action without much forethought. Life to a goblin is an adventure full of new things to explore and experience. typical goblin stands between 3.5 and 5 feet tall, with slender, elongated build. Goblins' arms are unusually long and spindly, making them adept at climbing cliffs and trees, and their skin has a stony texture, ranging from brownish red to moss green or gray. Their ears are large, swept back. Their eyes are intensely red, and many sport heavy bone protrusions on their spines or elbows. This distinctive appearance is a direct result of the goblins' unusual diet. For the Eldrazi's rise, goblins supplemented their normal diet with a kind of rock they pounded into bits and called grit. The Eldrazi presence has poisoned this rock, so the goblins have taken to eating powdered hedrons instead. Eating this magic-infused stone has given the goblins resistance to the psychic emanations of the Eldrazi, and some degree of invisibility to the Eldrazi's alien senses. As an added benefit, it toughens their skin, protecting them from the elements and physical dangers. To the goblin mind, the most useful trait in a leader is survival knowledge. Goblins use to measure this knowledge by venturing into ancient ruins to retrieve interest in their powerful objects, and goblins with more impressive artifacts have greater status. Goblins would carry their most impressive prizes with them at all times. The goblin who hadn't yet retrieved an object from a ruin was not considered a full member of the tribe. However, goblins would accept even a commonplace rock shell or chunk of metal as an artifact, since goblins' fearful nature steered many of them away from any actual ruins. Ambitious goblins, though, would strive constantly to outdo each other, delving deeper and deeper in search of the most impressive prizes. Thus, a few ambitious goblins have lived to an old age, so most goblin leaders are comparatively young. These practices have changed somewhat since the emergence of the Eldrazi. So cherishing the artifacts they find, goblins have turned to eating them, at least the ones constructed of hedrons. Goblins now gain status by measuring how many hedrons they have ingested, considering it a point of pride to have consumed as many as possible. So displaying cold trophies, goblins leave a small corner or fragment of the original relic, carries it as part of a collection, which is often strung together. They still compete frantically to locate new finds. The three major tribes of goblins. Felt like that might have been 2 pages there. Of the three major tribes of goblins, only one has endured the rise of the Eldrazi mostly intact. The Tuk-Tuk tribe is named for its late leader, a brave explorer who triggered a trap in the ancient ruin and emerged as something else. Tuk-Tuk was remade by strange magic. His living body was destroyed, with some remnant was imbued into a stone body that was goblin-like in general outline. Clinging to fragmented memories, this duplicate Tuk-Tuk returned to the tribe and was made chief. Though he was unable to speak, it was obvious that he had brought something truly amazing back from the ruins, and his physical strength was amplified 5-fold. So he led the tribe for 50 years, communicating with his followers by means of a weird psychic network, a result of the magic that created him. Tuk-Tuk's leadership was brought to an end by clever goblin Zada. Struck by the insight that most rare and powerful artifact was Tuk-Tuk himself, Zada convinced the other goblins that Tuk-Tuk was contaminated by contact with Eldrazi and was a dangerously unreliable leader. She assured them that destroying the construct and consuming its essence would make them virtually immune to the Eldrazi, and perhaps confer other benefits as well. The goblins rose up and overthrew Tuk-Tuk, shattering him into many pieces, which they then devoured. Zada now leads the tribe, directing them to prepare for survival in a world rapidly being consumed by the Eldrazi. She reasons that places already drained of their power will not be bothered again, by the monstrous broods, so the goblins are establishing settlements in lands that have been desiccated by Ulamog's horrible presence. Looking for ways to build secure shelter amid the brittle white residue of Acuum's rocky ground, goblins have developed domes that hang from stone spires or cling to the side-ish cliffs, and are experimenting with building on a solid slab constructed in the midst of a chalky waste. Lava Steppes used to be the most industrious and warlike goblin tribe, using the geothermal activity of Acuum to make alchemical weapons and forge strong metal gear. They believe that the fires deep beneath the ground were sentient, and their shamans inhaled sulfurous fumes in hopes of receiving communication. Ritual burning and scarification, part of the religious rituals of most lava steppes, extremely tolerant of heat and flame, and extremely desensitized to pain. Lava steppes were hit hard by the emergence of the Eldrazi. However, with the supernatural leadership that helped to shield their Tuk-Tuk Shim, seeking shelter in the deepest parts of Acuum, scattered remnants of the tribe have colonized the volcanic caves left behind by the previous eruptions and deep chasms opened by the Royal. They live as far underground as possible, following strange magical emanations called the Stone Song, which they believe come from the fire gods of the depths, but which are actually the result of alien energies of the Eldrazi. Perhaps warped by these energies, the subterranean goblins have adapted quickly to lightless conditions of their new home and have become sightless and pale, with enlarged ears for echolocation. Living in Balaged, the Grotag time was virtually wiped out with the coming of the Eldrazi. Clever by goblin standards, the Grotag tried to live by their wits, not a winning proposition. They fancied themselves great tamers of animals, imagining they had some sort of empathy with beasts based on a few lucky successes. Most of their other efforts to tame deadly creatures of Acuum ended in disaster. While the Grotag had nearly never-ending supply of bad ideas, they also had a nearly never-ending supply of Grotag, until the Eldrazi left all of Balaged for a blasted wasteland. Elves are a fearless and adaptable race that have fared better than most others in the tumultuous terrain of Zendikar, and have reacted to the appearance of Eldrazi with resilience and courage. They remain the most prevalent race on Marasa, and have a strong presence on the other regions as well. Even their villages, suspended from the treetops in the tangled jungles of the hilly interior, seem to regrow almost as soon as they're destroyed, much like the Marasan jungles themselves. Elves are about as tall as humans, but more slender. Their legs are long, pointed ears sweep back from their heads. They move gracefully and hold themselves with elegant poise, but they are people of the woodlands, and their life in the wilds is manifested in the practical simplicity of their clothes and equipment. Never wants to waste anything that can be reused. They stitch fabric from torn garments together to new, and transform broken sword blades into climbing gear. They prefer leather rather than metal, but they use metal for swords, spears, arrowheads, and hooks. For elves, surviving and thriving are deeply interdependent. This is apparent throughout their daily lives. An elf rarely lacks the equipment for any task that might rise during the day. On the rare occasions when preparation fails, they make up for it with improvisation and quick thinking, using lines and expert climbing techniques. The elves fearlessly span the gaps between branches or cliff faces, and some of the branch path elves take are impassable without their guidance and skills, as they often leap breaches and climb hidden trails. Confident that they can handle any threat or obstacle, Zendikar's elves are risk takers by nature. They believe nothing can be gained without some semblance of risk. They're not usually foolhardy, but they stand in the face of danger with courageous calm. Elves live much longer. Perhaps as a result, they have a very different experience of time. From their perspective, it is perfectly natural that past generations should persist in spirit form. Blending past and present in an eternal instinct. Similarly, there is nothing exceptional about the land changing, whether it takes place over centuries or in moments as a result of the royal. To humans, this sort of time dilation can seem like a spiritual experience, but the elves ascribe no special significance to it. They generally do not see mystical truths, transcendental weight, or a divine hand in events, however extraordinary it might be. For better or worse, elves are inclined to see the coming of the Eldrazi in a similar light, as another passing phenomena that must be endured. The deaths of thousands of elves and destruction of a continent are a terrible loss, of course. The elves do not wallow in sadness, and the past is always present, and the fallen elf nations remain a part of elf experience. Elf lives in small village clans. Leadership is decentralized and communal, although those with a combination of age and the particular skills relevant to a given decision tend to take the lead. Elvish social organization reflects their high degree of self-sufficiency. Individuals are expected to look after their own needs first and foremost, then those of their family, and those of the clan at large. Most clans were part of one of the three major Elvish nations, which were regional populations more than coherent states. With the coming of Eldrazi, however, two of the nations were virtually exterminated when the Titans destroyed the continent of Balaged. The elves of Imperious Draga nation Balaged had little respect for any other race of Zendikar, and even for other elves. They saw the survival of the nation as most important and jealously guarded their traditions, viewing the influence of other cultures as a weakness. With the destruction of Balaged, many Draga have joined the Tajirim and given up their xenophobic beliefs, but other remnants of the nation have instead taken up a nomadic lifestyle as raiders who prey both upon elves and non-elves. The Moldiah nation of Balaged had a relationship with the spirits of their elvish ancestors that set it apart from the other nations. The Moldiah saw the spirit world and mortal world as identical, aside from their tangibility. Death and the spirits of the dead were as much part of their lives as the natural world. This is not macabre to the elves at all. They consider it their truest view of the natural system. Like the Draga, many of the survivors of the Moldiah have joined the Tajirim, while others continue to follow their eccentric leader, Speaker Hazan, who in turn heeds the instructions and advice of a centuries-old elf ghost called Obun. But there is no preparing for the waking of Eldrazi. The elves continue to stress preparation as key to survival. The Tajirim have been working to rebuild their hidden paths in an effort to facilitate quick movement away from an Eldrazi incursion. Bands of rangers and naturalists have assembled to study Eldrazi movements with the intent of discerning their behavior patterns. Tajiru elves have become the stewards of the roads, often escorting caravans of refugees that are fleeing Eldrazi devastation. No matter what the race, meanwhile elf druids experiment with harvesting the resources that Zendikar itself provides and using them as weapons against the Eldrazi. They sometimes coax trees into bows, staff, and weapon handles, which make light weaponry that they believe to be particularly effective against the Eldrazi. They also create arrowheads from Hedron shards, which can have effective, if unpredictable, effects.
And the Methodist that I went to, Kevin Wagner was just there.
When Soren, Nahiri, and Ugin Foss brought the Eldrazi to Zendikar, the alien horrors were
After graduation, we sent invitations to church people, but other
greeted as monstrous gods, and all races of Zendikar fought the hordes of the Titans' brood. This battle persisted long after the Titans were imprisoned, until all of the lesser Eldrazi were wiped out. No new ones could be made. Then for generations, the people of Zendikar passed down the tales of the dark gods coming. As the centuries passed and tales were retold, though they changed ever so slightly, but in terribly important ways, angels had been among the first creatures to mount resistance, and they fought on the forefront of every great battle. To the people of Zendikar, the defiance of the angels seemed like concrete proof that a benevolent divine force stood between them and the horrors of the Eldrazi. The core and merfolk remembered stories of three gods who were present as their ancestors fought hordes of monsters, but in time they forgot that those gods birthed the monsters. The myths of the benevolent gods are not the only distortion of ancient memories. Even the word Eldrazi came to mean something entirely different during the time of their long absence. The people of Zendikar believed the Eldrazi were an ancient civilization, a race not too different from humans or merfolks. Created the Hedrons, erected great buildings and monuments from stone, and left behind a legacy of great magical power. Even in the wake of the Eldrazi's rise, the truth behind this myth is only gradually becoming clearer. Some core have come to a better understanding of their race's settled past. Other explorers have realized that magic contained within these ruins can be used for fighting the Eldrazi, suggesting that they were first built by the Eldrazi's foes. For the merfolk, retrieving such magic from ancient ruins has become high priority, providing a glimmer of hope that their race and the other peoples of Zendikar might somehow survive the Eldrazi walking their world. So that looks like all the time we have left for today. Looks like we'll be looking at the different regions of the world, which probably would have been helpful to have had this earlier, because they name dropped a lot of places in the last section, but I've got no context for any of them really. Looks like they didn't make a map or anything of this plane like they did for the last book. That might have been nice for them to do. I'm guessing, at least I don't remember seeing any, I'm guessing they weren't inclined to actually create anything new for this product, since but that's it for today. I think we'll be opening the second ice box tomorrow.